what's really interesting about these two businesses is they have real insights into the early workings of the global economy and what consumers and small to big businesses are seeing early on. I wanted to kind of start there, and I'll start with you, John. Just talk a little bit about the uncertainty you've heard. I mean, I have heard over the last 2 days, but you've probably heard some today as well at this conference. That everyone's a little bit unsure what's happening in the global economy. What are you seeing so far? How's it impacting your customers?
Sure.
And so on.
So for those of you who don't yet know, Payoneer is a global business, a payments company serving 2 million small businesses in 190 countries and territories around the world. The overwhelming majority of them are outside of the United States. And so what we're hearing from small business owners who are selling from South Korea to Latin America or from China to the Middle East is that the macroeconomy clearly is going through disruption, like the early first few months of COVID.
Right.
But in that disruption, there's innovation and opportunity, and it's not deglobalization, it's diversification. And there's a confidence and an optimism from SMBs around the world to be more resilient, more diversified in their franchises. So that would be the primary thing.
That would be where you start. Jimmy, what are you seeing?
So Flutterwave is a payment technology company, Africa focused. We help consumers and global companies get paid and pay across Africa. What we've seen so far has not been any different from the previous data we have, but we think over time there will be a natural, value chain impact to African companies, because obviously there's a lot of trade between Africa and the US, Africa and the UK, Africa and China. And over time, there could be some impact regarding how that happens. But right now, it's very early days for us. We're hoping, we don't see much impact going forward.
Do either of you have any direct concerns about tariffs changes here? Are there any parts of that you think about in terms of your business?
Well, I mean, I certainly think about it because we have small business customers in the United States that import from around the world who are concerned about consumer demand and will a recession happen, and if a recession happen, will demand slow? So that'd be one area. We also have US businesses that are in this moment very focused on global workforces and AI and recognizing that today, if you're a global business and particularly a digital business, you can hire from anywhere around the world and use AI. And if there's margin compression, globalizing your workforce, there's sort of labor arbitrage that people can capture. And so we're certainly seeing US businesses thinking more globally about their workforces. We have a workforce management payroll product that is new. We acquired a business last summer, and that team is reporting back to us real interest among US businesses to be more global in their teams rather than less global. That'd be one example.
Are you seeing is it similar? So you're not in there in terms of
Yeah, pretty similar. Not much though regarding that, because if you look at a lot of our clients, they're in the services industry, not necessarily
that's true
products. So that might not have an impact right now, but I think over time there will be also some little impact there.
Where are you, staying with you for a second, Jamie, where are you seeing growth in terms of like the sectors? You guys, as we've talked before, you cover quite a few sort of different verticals. Where's most of the growth coming for you right now?
One big piece is cross-border payments, right?
Right.
That's growing massively. As companies are going and scaling beyond their borders, you've seen that happening across board. One is remittances as well, as you always know, from the US, UK, EU into Africa. That is growing massively. We're seeing growth as well in SMBs who are selling their wares globally right now, right? Via our platform. So an average African SMB can now sell globally thanks to Flutterwave, right? So our goal really is to keep enabling them to do that. But we're seeing growth in those sectors. Travel is also growing. It's come back really strongly.
How do you define travel in this sense?
So the OTAs, then the airlines as well. You see there are growth in there. So we're seeing growth in remittances, travel, hospitality, FMCG as well.
And are you? I saw that you partnered. I think it was with Circle. Do I have that right? That whole area of stable coins, is that something that you see down the road, or is it a thing that's growing quite quickly now?
It's actually growing really fast in the sense that, when an African business wants to move money into a supplier globally, right now it will take them maybe 2-3 days.
Right.
With stables, they can do that it's almost real time, right? Because of that infrastructure. I think with the right network that Circle is building behind that entire opportunity use cases, that will drive a lot more volume as well.
Right. What about you, John? What sectors are really driving the growth right now in broad terms?
I think the most exciting thing across a business like ours with 2 million customers, services customers, over half of our revenue in the services business, is the expansion to Latin America, to Africa, into Europe, the sort of reshaping of where the priority corridors are. I think that'd be one area of I think real growth. I do think stablecoins long term will be an interesting development area for cross-border payments, certainly for SMBs. Across our network, which is 7,000 corridors, we recently acquired a business in China,
Right.
A payment service provider. We're a regulated business, and we're regulated globally. We're the third Western firm to be regulated in China to provide cross-border payments. This is really important for a company like ours, which is an everywhere to everywhere company. And 85% of China's exports don't come to the United States. They go to the rest of the world. The entrepreneurs and SMBs in China are very focused on selling to the globe. So folks in Africa are buying iPhone cases manufactured in Shenzhen. That has nothing to do with tariffs.
Right.
And I think the economy is very, very global. And I think right now, looking at the disruption that's happening in the tariff landscape purely through a U.S. lens misses the dynamism of SMBs around the globe. And in this macro disruption, it's macro between the U.S. and the rest, but rest to rest is taking advantage. And looking for opportunities to drive more trade, to drive more collaboration. And I think those opportunities for a company like Payoneer, where 80% of our customers are global or more, right? We're an everywhere to everywhere company, and that feels really exciting to us.
So it's so interesting. It's a really great point in general. It also makes me just think about some of the conversations that you hear in a city like DC, right? Where, to your point, everyone's sort of narrowly focused on the US. But just that argument about the future of globalization, just what you're both talking about here as well. Globalization is happening with or without
there is
right?
a extraordinary tailwind to globalization. And in fact, this sort of tariff dynamics may be a catalyst to accelerate corridors that used to be small, nice to haves, become pathways for real growth. And I think that's a moment in time now. And we have 3,700 employees on the ground in 35 countries. And next week is our Payoneer's 20th anniversary. And we're bringing 20 customers from around the globe. And what's common about all of them is the bridge between their ambition and their achievement is globalization. And so what we're seeing is creativity in the services sector. There's a US-based business, IA Blueprint is the name of the company. They help insurance companies in the US leverage freelance and contract workers across the Philippines. Well, that business's profitability depends on a global workforce. And so today, I think we will continue to see more global to global trade as opposed to less global to global trade.
You get a similar sense, right? Obviously.
Yes, obviously. I think it's spot on. It's the same thing you're seeing all over the world. The world is a global village now. That cannot change. And you see a lot more corridors growing even stronger now than before. And I think as people scale their businesses across multiple markets and geographies, naturally they will need payments that work for that market. You also be able to move goods and services across it. It just it's to stopping this.
And it's certainly common sense to have antibiotics manufactured in the United States.
Right.
For my kids, right? Like as a dad, that obviously makes a lot of sense to me. But when you think about the global economy, I do think thinking about the 7.5 billion people on the planet is important to consider, not just the 340 million, Americans here.
Right. And in terms of, come back to you, GB, when you think about your core markets right now in Africa, right? And are there some markets, and I know I've asked you this last time, but I'll ask again, just in terms of where you're seeing new growth or faster growth that we might not even be expecting or thinking about?
It's still the same suspects. Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Kenya are the principal markets. And you have big ones like DRC and Morocco, pretty big as well, and they're sprouting. Then obviously you have the likes of Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Cameroon. They're also doing great numbers. But that's where we see it growing, and you see a lot of inter-Africa trade happening now, right? Money travel between Nigeria and Ghana, between maybe Kenya and Uganda, or Rwanda. That is growing massively right now, and we're trying to create an infrastructure to drive that even more aggressively.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because the part of the conversation, particularly in the US-Africa conversation, has been, the need for African countries to trade more with each other, because the share of overall trade within Africa is so low. And you've talked about this sort of challenge, like where you could go to have a license with the EU and it covers you and you can do a lot of business. Are you seeing any sorts of, are you having conversations with sorts of regulators or policymakers about the AfCFTA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement? Are you involved in any of that in trying to make this happen?
Yes, we are. I'll give you a very interesting example that's happened recently. Ghana and Rwanda started a passport licensing model, which is the first of its kind, where if you're licensed in Ghana, you don't have to get licensed in Rwanda anymore.
Oh, I see.
That's really, really amazing to see. If that actually gets, a huge push, that can then make Africa one market,
right,
from that perspective. But that said, AfCFTA is a very big opportunity. The PAPs as well, being driven by the African Exim Bank, is also an amazing infrastructure. And what is very interesting here is, if Nigeria is trading with Ghana and they have to go to US dollar first because to come back to cities, that's where the problem is. But with PAPs in between and a Flutterwave leveraging that infrastructure, you can move money directly from Nigeria to Ghana, not Nigeria to New York to Ghana, right?
Right.
And that helps to make the trade faster. That creates a lot more, less volatility in currency, less fees as well. That's where I think the opportunity is to drive more Africa trade opportunity.
And to wrap up, because we've only got so much time, but I know that the other topic that comes up all the time, almost every stage here, including even with the governor of Mississippi, is our questions about the impact of artificial intelligence on the future of your businesses. I'll start with you, John. You've already mentioned it in passing, but I want to know what...
It's an amazing thing to watch a team of 6 or 8 people in Vietnam or South Korea or in Morocco or Egypt build a service business that rivals, looks like, operates like a business that would have been 100 people a decade ago. An SMB innovation, global workforces plus AI levels the playing field for globalization. And we're seeing that happen, rapid iteration there. It's actually the big companies that move slower than the small firms. Inside of Payoneer, of course, we're using AI, machine learning in our funnels, in our R&D teams, and the products we build. But even we don't move as quickly as a team of 10 people that is working. And I do think the leveling playing field of AI and global workforces combined with cross-border trade will be super positive for the global economy once we get past sort of this instant of macro disruption.
And specifically with your business, how much have you
we were in planning
just day to
we were in
day.
planning sessions earlier this week, and it's a growing percentage of our allocation is teams working on AI.
JB, what are you saying? What are you doing?
Well, for us in payments, AI is driving a lot of our forward infrastructure, right? Like you said, machine learning is a major thing what it's doing right now when it comes to AI. Being able to manage fraud properly at scale and help our merchants to stay safe in our ecosystem.
Yeah.
AI is able to drive that also in customer experience as well. A lot more responsive infrastructure to help customers resolve their issues themselves without having a human being having to have an interaction. So we're working on that, and we're a lot of under the hood stuff that you don't actually see.
Right.
Like if you want to pay, we know that you pay before Apple Pay. How do we help you use Apple Pay again to be faster? How do we optimize your rails for you? So that's how we do AI for right now.
Are you having to make major CapEx investments, or is it just kind of day-to-day add-ons to things you're already doing? Or?
So every company AI strategy is different. So there's some vendors that come out of the box now with AI for your things that you're using.
Okay.
So you don't have to do anything but use those vendors.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to build in. And so it's a combo of both. In some instances where we get new vendors who have AI built into their product, and we also build into ourselves as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, we've kind of wrapped up, but I suppose one last question would just be, how do you see the next let's say to the end of the year, how do you see the economy look for?
I certainly, from a U.S. perspective, it really depends on what the tariff and consumer recession will look like. If there are
you're already plugging in, there'll be a recession.
Well, there's 8 to 12 weeks of physical goods on hand in the U.S., and 60% of boats from China were left in port. If factories that used to work 6 or 7 days a week are working 4 days a week, how quickly can those factories get turned back on to drive goods back into the U.S. in time for back to school and holiday? As it relates to the consumer economy, I think AI and the global workforce economy and services has lots of real strength and opportunity. But I think the shock of we're in the first few months of COVID, right? Where people are figuring it out, and the entrepreneurs and small businesses of the world are the ones who are powering through and diversifying their businesses, and I think that's really strong for the long-term opportunities.
Quick 5-second thoughts on.
I'm with John on this. Spot on.
Yeah? Good. Okay. Okay. Please join me in thanking them for an excellent conversation.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you both.
Thank you.